Hey, this is Presh Talwalkar. The S.A.T is a standardized test in America used for college admissions. The test is broken up into two main areas. One is a test of reading and writing, and another is a test of math. The entire exam takes a little bit over 2 hours, and there are 100 questions. This is very different from the very first test that was given in 1926. That test had 10 different sections, and there were an amazing 390 questions to be answered in just over 2 hours. So you really had to answer each question in about 20 seconds. And the questions were still quite difficult, and they were in subjects that would appear very different to the test questions we have today. In this video, I will share a sampling of questions from the original S.A.T exam. While we do have a copy of the official test, unfortunately, the official answer key was lost. So the answers shown in this video are my responses. I believe they are the correct answer, but if you think there is a different correct answer, please feel free to share in the comment section. So let's get started with the first section of definitions. The format of this section is pretty straightforward. You are given a sentence that defines a word, and you have to select the correct word from a list of options. So here's the first sentence. And blank is a word used to limit or qualify the application of a noun or nominal phrase. This is very straightforward. The correct answer is adjective. So we cross off that option and let's go to the next sentence. Blank is that branch of mathematical analysis which reasons about the quantity by the use of letters and generalized symbols. This is again straightforward. The correct answer is algebra. Next question. The blank case is that case of a noun used to express the direct object of a verb. I did not know the answer to this question. I had to look it up, and I believe the correct answer is the accusative case. If you know grammar better than I do, please chime in, but for now, I'm going to say the correct answer is the accusative case. So now let's go to the next question. Blank is the color seen when sunlight is almost completely absorbed. I find it interesting that this question is actually testing scientific knowledge. It doesn't have anything to do with vocabulary. The correct answer to this question is black. Next question. Blank is an amorphous white compound, isomeric with starch, insoluble in all ordinary solvents, forming the fundamental material of the structure of plants. I didn't know the answer to this question. I also find it interesting that it's testing scientific knowledge. The correct answer is cellulose. Here's another interesting question. The interval between two notes whose vibration frequencies are in the ratio 1:1 is called blank. Perhaps those of you who have studied music or have played an instrument would know the answer. I didn't know the answer. I had to look it up, and the correct answer is unison. Here's another interesting musical question. A blank is a small wind instrument in which the notes are determined by valves or pistons which open communication into the auxiliary bands of tubing, thus varying the length of the vibrating column. Wow. I had to look this one up, and the correct answer is cornet. So already in the first section, I feel the test is quite different from the S.A.T exam that's given today. It does test a lot more general knowledge than would be tested in the exam today. Now let's go to section 2, arithmetic. Many of these questions are straightforward. A man's salary is $20 per week, and he spends $14 a week. How long will it take him to save $300? Well, each week he earns $20 and spends $14, which is a savings of $6. In order to save $300, it will take him 300 divided by 6, which equals 50 weeks. Pretty straightforward. Next question. 56 pounds of camping outfit are to be carried. A, B, C. share the load in these proportions: 3 parts to A, 2 parts to B, and 2 parts to C. How many pounds does A carry? Let's let X be the share of 1 part. Then we know there are 3 parts to A, 2 parts to B, and 2 parts to C. So we have 3x plus 2x plus 2x is equal to 56, which is the total 56 pounds. This means 7x is equal to 56, so 1 part is equal to 56 over 7, which equals 8. We need to know how many pounds A carries, which is 3 parts, so 3 times x is equal to 24 pounds. Pretty straightforward. Now here's a question which is quite a bit different. A watch was set right at noon on Thursday. At 6 p.m. on the next day, it was 36 minutes fast. At that rate, how many seconds will it gain in half an hour? We first start out by calculating the number of hours between 12 noon Thursday and 6 p.m. Friday. So 12 noon Thursday to 12 noon Friday will be 24 hours. We then add 6 more hours to get to 6 p.m. Friday. So 24 plus 6 is equal to 30 hours. At this rate, we have 36 minutes advancing fast per 30 hours, which is equal to 1.2 minutes per hour. We need to convert that into seconds in half an hour. So in half an hour, we'll have half as much, which is 0.6 minutes. And then we will multiply this by 60 seconds per minute, and that will give us 36 seconds per half hour. Now here's another interesting question. The rear wheel of a motorcycle is 6 feet in circumference. The gear wheel attached to this rear wheel has 12 teeth and is driven by a sprocket wheel of 24 teeth. How far does the rear wheel travel for 1 complete revolution of the sprocket wheel? I'd never solved a problem like this in any SAT exam, but the mathematics are not too hard to figure out. So let's start out with the gear ratio. The sprocket wheel to the gear wheel has 24 teeth to 12 teeth. So every time the sprocket wheel is moving around once, the gear wheel will move around 2 times. Now, if the gear wheel is moving around 2 times and it's connected to the rear wheel, which is 6 feet in circumference, the rear wheel will move 2 times. So 2 times 6 will be equal to 12 feet. So that's how far the rear wheel travels for 1 complete revolution of the sprocket wheel. It's not too hard mathematically, but the question itself does take a lot of mental modeling to actually work out what is the correct calculation to make. Now let's go to the next section, classification. Here are the directions. Each group contains 6 words. 3 of these are related to each other. Indicate which 3 are thus most closely related. So here's one group: silver, platinum, amethyst, coinage, emerald, sapphire. Which 3 are most closely related? I think the correct answer is amethyst, emerald, and sapphire because these are gemstones. Here's another question: orange, pear, lemon, grapefruit, prune, and chocolate. Now the first 4 items are all fruits, but then we would look for a closer relation. So I would say orange, lemon, and grapefruit are the 3 most closely related because these are all citrus fruits. Now let's go to another question: Columbus, Socrates, Beethoven, Wagner, Verdi, and Corneille. I believe the 3 most closely related would be Beethoven, Wagner, and Verdi because these are composers. Here's another sample question. The group is all numbers: 79, 35, 47, 53, 42, 63. Which 3 numbers are most closely related? Looking at this list, I would say 79, 47, and 53 because these are all prime numbers. Here's another question: triangle, polygon, rhombus, trapezoid, square, and geometry. Arguably, these are all related words, and you could make many different connections. But I believe the correct answer would be rhombus, trapezoid, and square, because these three are examples of quadrilaterals. I have to say, I overall had fun answering these questions when I understood the words and I was able to come up with some connection of three words that were most closely related. But there were also questions on this section that completely baffled me. Here's one. Bonton, Gossard, Jerkis, Del Monte, Mavis, and Gentile. I have no idea what many of these are, so there would be no way I could figure out which three are most closely related. Perhaps you can share the correct answer. Another one. Norway, Bulgaria, Denmark, Japan, Greece, and Romania. I don't know which three of these countries would be most closely related. So I think this section is quite interesting, but I could imagine if people were to do this test today, the only thing that would happen is that every single question would be put up on social media and people would actually argue about which three are the most closely related. But it was a fun mental exercise. Now let's go to the next section of artificial language. So unfortunately, the questions are lost in the official copy, but the directions are given. So section 4 consists of the following directions. You are given some vocabulary and the rules of an artificial language. So for example, some vocabulary would be the word I is translated as ought and me as auteb. You are then given some rules, like plurals of words are formed by adding a. So we would be oughta and them would be oleba. Eventually, you would need to translate some of the sentences according to the vocabulary and the other rules that were given. So for example, you might have to translate he pleases me, and that would be ol tanto oteb. Or you'd be given something like ota bemo thantid, and you would have to translate that as we live pleasantly. This section would be quite grueling mentally to do, so I'm happy they got away from this section and focused on testing other abilities. Now let's go to the next section of antonyms. Each group of 4 words contains 2 words which are opposite or nearly the opposite in meaning. Identify them. So one group of 4 words is thin, wet, dry, easy. Well, this question surely is easy because the antonyms would be wet and dry. Here's another question. Solid, frail, charitable, residuary. It's a little bit more difficult, but solid and frail would be antonyms. Here's another question. Celestial, infernal, timorous, corroborative. The vocabulary has increased. I believe the 2 antonyms would be celestial, referring to the stars, and infernal. Here's another question. Obsequious, impudent, quiescent, and fallacious. This one was a lot trickier. I believe the correct answer is obsequious, someone who is following, and impudent, someone who would be rude and would not follow. Now let's go to the next section, which is number series completion. I'm actually kind of sad they got away with this. In each line, the numbers are arranged in accordance with some particular scheme. Write what 2 numbers should come next. Here's a sample question. 4, 7, 18, 21, 32. Let's try to find a pattern. So between the first 2 numbers, we add 3, then we add 11 to the next number, then we add 3, and then we add 11. So if we continue this pattern, we would add 3, so 32 plus 3 is equal to 35, and then we would add 11, which gives us the next number of 46. So the correct answer is 35 and 46. Let's do another problem. We have 25, 36, 49, 64, 81. The pattern should be very obvious. We have square numbers, 5 squared, 6 squared, 7 squared, 8 squared, and 9 squared. The next 2 numbers will be 10 squared and 11 squared, which correspond to 100 and 121. Next question. 2160, 360, 72, 18, 6. This is a bit trickier, but let's look at ratios of numbers. So if we take 2160 and divide by 6, we get 360. We then divide by 5, we get 72. We divide by 4, we get 18. If we divide by 3, we get 6. So continuing this pattern, we would want to divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. And finally, we would divide by 1. 3 divided by 1 is equal to 3. Here's another number sequence. This one was much harder. 3, 4, 12, 39, 103. So I studied this pattern for a while, and I eventually thought to look at the differences of numbers. So from 3 to 4, we have a difference of 1. 4 to 12, we add 8. 12 to 39, we add 27. And 39 to 103, we add 64. So we are going by different cubes. We have 1 cubed, 2 cubed, 3 cubed, and 4 cubed. So the pattern will continue if we add 5 cubed, which will be 125. 103 plus 125 will be 228. And then we add 6 cubed, which will be 216. And that gives us the last number, which is 444. Here's another difficult question. 750, 21, 264, 183, and 210. So this pattern doesn't go increasing or decreasing. We actually have an alternating sequence. But once again, let's look at the differences between consecutive numbers. So from 750, if we subtract 729, we get to 21. Then if we add 243, we get to 264. Then we need to subtract 81, and we need to add 27. Now looking at all of these numbers, these are powers of 3. So 27 is 3 cubed, 81 is 3 to the 4th, 243 is 3 to the power of 5, and then 729 is 3 to the power of 6. We also have an alternating sequence of subtracting and adding. So we have added 3 to the power of 3. So we then will need to subtract 3 squared, which is equal to 9. 210 minus 9 is equal to 201. And now we need to add 3 to the power of 1, which is plus 3. So the last number is 204. This is quite difficult. I did not solve this problem on the first time I tried to figure it out, and students only had 20 seconds to figure out the pattern. So this is quite challenging. Now let's go to section 7, analogies. The S.A.T. had an analogy section until the year 2005. So let's see where it all started. The first 2 words are related to each other in some way. You are to see what the relationship is between the first 2 words and find the one word that is related in the same way to the third word. So here's how it works. The first 2 words will be wire is to electricity. Now we need to figure out the same relation, pipe is to some word, from the following options. Is it wipe, tube, water, stem, or plumber? So presumably the relationship between wire and electricity is that wire is a pathway for electricity. So a pipe would be a pathway for water. So I believe water would be the correct answer. Let's do another analogy. Frog is to amphibian as whale is to what? The choices are fish, oil, mammal, elephant, whole. It would seem to me the relationship is that frog is classified as an amphibian, so whale would be classified as a mammal. Let's do another question. Beacon is to helmsman as wisdom is to what? Ruler, tooth, sagacity, wizard, or grief. Who has not grown up with sailing metaphors and language? So I had to look this up, of course. So beacon is something that is used as a guide for the helmsman who steers a ship. So it would seem to be that wisdom would be used as a guide for someone who is steering something. So presumably it would be a guide for a ruler who is steering the path of a country. But I don't know why this has to be the correct answer. Could it not be used for a wizard who is also guiding a wizardly world of magic? So I will give a little personal bias. Analogies were never my favorite topic, They were always full of vocabulary that was esoteric, and I could never quite figure out the relationship that was the correct relationship. But in any case, this was the original analogy section, and personally, I'm glad they got rid of it. So with that said, let's go to the next section, which is logical inference. I found this section to be quite interesting. Assume the premise or premises to be true and unquestioned, and judge the conclusion in relation to them. Here are premises. The medals were given only to the best students, and Jacob received one of the medals. Conclusion: Jacob is one of the best students. The answer choices are necessarily true, necessarily false, probably true, probably false, or undetermined. In this case, it's straightforward. Jacob is one of the best students must necessarily be true, because Jacob received one of the medals. So let's do another question. Premises: Professor Johnson has given a great many lectures, and they have all been interesting. Conclusion: Today's lecture by Professor Johnson will be interesting. Now, you can't say it's necessarily true because it is possible that the lecture may be boring. But you could say that it is probably true based on experience. I do find this question to be interesting because this is the actual type of reasoning we use in everyday life, and it was actually put on a test. Nowadays, someone would complain the question could have many different interpretations, but I still think it's interesting to put this kind of reasoning on a test. Let's do another question. Premises: 15 people have visited the gallery since this new picture was hung, and all of them have admired it. But people's tastes vary. Conclusion: The next person who comes in will not like the picture. Just like the last question, we could say that we don't know it's necessarily true or false, but it is most likely based on experience, probably false. It's most likely that the next person who comes in will like the new picture, but it's possible that the next person may not. Now let's do another question. All of the leaders of society in our town were present at the wedding. Mr. and Mrs. Brown were present at the wedding. Conclusion: Mr. and Mrs. Brown are leaders of society. Now in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Brown could be leaders who were at the wedding, but they could also be some other guest. They could be parents, they could be relatives, they could just be neighbors, they could just be close friends. So we really can't say one way or the other. So in this case, I think the correct answer would be undetermined. Now let's go to section 9, paragraph reading. These questions are quite wild. In each paragraph, one important word and one word only has been substituted for another word and spoils the meaning of the paragraph. Find the word and cross it out. Here's a paragraph. A fondness for reading is an unfailing source of recreation. Whatever our dominant interest is at the moment, we can find a book to harmonize with our mood, if we try. The friendliness of books is a fickle comfort to the book lover. So there are many details in this paragraph that say that reading a book is enjoyable and can always match your mood. So you can't just get rid of any of the words that will have this characteristic because the paragraph emphasizes it many points. So we're looking for one word which is different from that, and that would be fickle, because fickle means it happens sometimes or it won't happen. So it can't be a fickle comfort, it's a reliable comfort. So in this paragraph, we would cross out the word fickle. Let's do another example. Most scientific discoveries have been due to a combination of the keen eye with the inquisitive spirit, which ignores whatever is unusual and which also sees a problem in the most commonplace occurrences. So this is true about scientific discoveries. You must have a keen eye, inquisitive spirit. You would be looking for things that are commonplace, but you would also look for things which are unusual. But in this case, you'd want to focus on the things which are unusual. You wouldn't want to ignore whatever is unusual. So we will cross out the word ignores. That is the wrong word. So if all of these questions have not been mentally grueling enough, the exam concluded with one more section, which turned out to be experimental and wasn't scored, but this wasn't known to the students who took the exam. The experimental section had a variety of questions that were of the forms of the sections 1 through 9, but it also had some other questions. So here's another type of question. Which word is not like the other four? Bend, shave, chop, whittle, and shear. I believe shave, chop, whittle, and shear would all be removing materials. So in this case, bend would be the odd word out because all the other actions involve reducing the main material. But maybe there are other interpretations to this question. Here's another interesting question. If the following words were seen on a wall by looking in a mirror on an opposite wall, which word would appear exactly the same as if seen directly? The choices are Ohio, saw, noon, motor, auto. So let's actually try to visualize this. What would happen if we take the mirror image of each word? We would see that only one word would appear exactly the same, and that would be the answer choice auto. I think it is fun to look back at the 1926 test because it is as if we're looking at a mirror back 99 years ago. We can see how many things have changed and how many things are still the same. How did you do on the 1926 original S.A.T. exam? Thanks for making us one of the best communities on YouTube. See you next episode of Mind Your Decisions, where we solve the world's problems, one video at a time.